Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani is taking the US political world by storm, both on and offline, and if polling is to be believed, he's practically a shoo-in for the NYC mayoral election later this year. At a time of political turmoil, rising authoritarianism, an affordability crisis, and a genocide in Gaza, his strategy of a laser focus on clear policy to ease the cost of living and his uncompromising opposition to both President Trump's authoritarianism and the bipartisan support of Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign cut straight through with voters. This, combined with his natural charisma and a savvy use of social media, galvanized an army of canvassers to win over both the disillusioned and the outraged within the Democratic Party base, whose current opinion of the party elite has really hit rock bottom. The Democratic Party as a whole, whilst leading in the congressional ballot due to polls with voters' opposition to Trump, has seen their own approval rating hit rock bottom at -28, with their positivity rating its lowest in NBC's polling since 1990. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has seen his approval tank also. His capitulation to Trump over the congressional budget and widening opposition to his unwavering support for Israel has seen his favorability drop to -28 as well. That's according to YouGov. It's clear that what Americans want to see from their politicians is sincerity, the will to fight, and to make it clear that they're on the sides of voters, something that Mamdani has been very easy and able to master. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries doesn't seem to think so, however. He's refused to endorse the incredibly popular Mamdani, given his steadfast support of Israel and his opposition to the progressive politics of the Democratic Socialists of America, of which Mamdani is a member. The backlash to this non-endorsement has been severe. Here is Emma Fikeland on the Majority Report on MSNBC on how the DSA should react.
What is the issue then with Mamdani that you think breaks through that people like Hakeem Jeffries and the hosts of CNBC and the Bill Ackmans of this world don't get? I know the short answer is the capitalism part of it, but what is it about the mobilization of these people that they want and say that they would like and they say they need in order to win in 2026 and 2028, and yet somehow they're clueless to the fact that he has managed to do it?
I mean, what happened to vote blue no matter who?
Right.
I mean, what happened? I was told that. And then as somebody who is a registered Democrat but was supportive of Bernie Sanders both times he ran, I can't tell you the amount of times that was shouted at us. And many of us did. An overwhelming majority of Bernie supporters did end up supporting the nominee. So this is a very unfortunate thing that Hakeem Jeffries is doing for his own political career, frankly, because in that primary, which was the largest turnout in the history of New York City mayoral primaries, Zoran Mamdani won in Hakeem Jeffries' own district by double digits, by around 12 points. Mm-hmm. So this is just basically a siren call for anybody in DSA or anybody who is closely associated with Zoran Mamdani to primary Hakeem Jeffries in his own district. I think that's going to be happening also in Dan Goldman's district, et cetera. What people don't understand, I think, about the pro-Palestine issue is that it's a litmus test for folks. If you can be brave and stand up against this genocide, then we can trust you on a variety of different issues. And Zoran didn't win in spite of his pro-Palestine position. He won a majority of Jewish voters because of it. Yeah. And that is what Jeffries is incapable of responding to as somebody who takes money from AIPAC. And it's why Democratic leadership is bogging down this party right now. We need a change in leadership, because if you can't harness this energy right now, you are basically saying, we don't care if Donald Trump wins over and over again and this authoritarian takeover continues, because they're rejecting grassroots energy in favor of donors. And that's the core of the problem right now.
Yep, the donors are the ones who are the most important every time, regardless of what the Democratic Party voter base says. I mean, there was literally a centrist podcast I watched where Jeffries couldn't explain his lack of endorsement for Zoran Mamdani. Like, an actual centrist was saying, it's the Democratic candidate. Vote blue no matter who. At least that centrist from the Bulwark podcast, I believe it was, stayed true to his principles. And Fikeland is right. Jeffries should be worried, as it's not just Mamdani who's making progressive waves in challenges to establishment Democrats. DSA-backed Minnesota State Senator Omar Fateh shocked politicos to win the internal DFL, that's the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, the Minnesota version of the Democratic Party, their internal ballot for the endorsement in the Minneapolis mayoral election. Fateh, born in the USA to Somalian parents, ran on a platform of increased rent controls, social housing, increasing the minimum wage, and taxing wealthy residents. His main challenge will come from incumbent Mayor Jacob Frey, who is expected to receive the DFL endorsement, but that was not to be. An establishment stalwart, Frey has consistently stonewalled progressive legislation. He had vetoed multiple urbanization reform policies, has also both vetoed and opposed proposals that could enable future rent control policies, and on top of this, has vetoed plenty of workers' rights bills, such as a minimum wage for rideshare drivers and a labour standards board, and that was because he was being lobbied by business owners. He's also, like every other establishment Democrat, very pro-Israel, blocking a ceasefire motion and a motion to protect pro-Palestine campus protesters at the University of Minneapolis. This all stands to reason. Fatah has run a predominantly grassroots-funded campaign, yet Free has raked in the megabucks from the landlord lobby. The DFL endorsement doesn't guarantee Fatah victory, though. It's a ranked choice election, so he'll need to build a wide base of support to oust Frey in November, as they are both still running. Now, moving on, let me introduce you to someone else. Graham Plattner, from the northern state of Maine. An oyster farmer and veteran, he's entered the fray in the Democratic primary to face incumbent GOP Senator Susan Collins. And just like Soran, he's put out a pretty snappy campaign ad, and it's produced by Mamdani ally Maurice Katz.
What I love most about Maine are the people. I have never met people who are more hardscrabble, even in a place that requires you to work like 2 or 3 different jobs. We have watched this state become essentially unlivable for working class people, and it makes me deeply angry. My name is Graham Plattner, and I'm running for U.S. Senate in Maine to defeat Susan Collins. A decade of military service going overseas, farming oysters to feed my community, diving to lend a hand to other fishermen, trying to start a family. But everywhere I've gone, it seems like the fabric of what holds us together is being ripped apart by billionaires and corrupt politicians, profiting off of destroying our environment, driving our families into poverty, and crushing the middle class. I did 4 infantry tours in the Marine Corps and the Army. I'm not afraid to name an enemy, and the enemy is the oligarchy. It's the billionaires who pay for it, and the politicians who sell us out. And yeah, that means politicians like Susan Collins. I'm not fooled by this fake charade of Collins' deliberations and moderation. The difference between Susan Collins and Ted Cruz is at least Ted Cruz is honest about selling us out and not giving a damn. People know that the system is screwing them. They know it in their bones. Nobody I know around here can afford a house. Healthcare is a disaster. Hospitals are closing. We have watched all of that get ripped away from us, and everyone's just trying to keep it all together. Why can't we have universal health care like every other first world country? Why can't we take care of our veterans when they come home? Why are we funding endless wars and bombing children? Why are CEOs more powerful than unions? We fought 3 different wars since the last time we raised the minimum wage. I'm not pretending to have all the answers, but I know that I'm asking the right questions. When I tell people around here that I'm running for Senate, sometimes the initial reaction is, what the f***? But when I tell them why I'm doing it, because I truly do believe that we can build a system that is going to represent working people, the #1 response has been, well, thank God somebody's going to do it. You're supposed to fight for the things you love. This is our home, and I will fight tirelessly for it, for you. It's Mainers first, in Maine, always.
Now, it's worth pointing out that there are a lot of kind of copycat Zorans around from the Democratic Party's centrist campaign, and you can spot the centrists from the real progressives by the focus on policy in the videos, right? And it was very clear that Graham got the message in that people want to hear what they're going to do for the people of America. He's made it very clear. Universal healthcare and higher wages. His platform is outspokenly progressive, and he's clear that he has more people to fight than just Collins with his anti-oligarchs messaging. His support for Medicare for all, campaign finance reform, and an end to pointless wars. Like, he knows full well as a veteran that these wars are pointless. And he wants to pass the Protect Right to Organize, or PRO Act, to ensure the US labor workers' labor rights. Collins has defied the polls time after time, it seems, to keep Maine red, despite it being a Democratic-leaning state. And a wide field of candidates has emerged, hoping to be the one to unseat her in a pretty favorable Democratic environment despite their low polling numbers. Then, if we move on, there's Dr. Abdul El Sayed, running in the Michigan primary for Senate.
Michigan made my dreams possible. I grew up all-American here, became a doctor to help people, and spent my career making government deliver for us. I took on politicians and rebuilt Detroit's health department, got glasses for thousands of kids, helped young moms, and took on corporate polluters and led in our schools. Then I ran the state's largest health department, where we built big things, model programs for veteran services and to protect our kids.
Dr. El Sayed named public officials Official of the Year.
Cancels medical debt for thousands of Michiganders.
And yeah, I'm a bro with a podcast
To dig into the epidemics America's facing.
of economic and health insecurity and the political system that holds us back. Here in Michigan, anything should be possible.
We need a little bit more of that Michigan grit and values in Washington. We've got to fight back hard against Trump and Musk with a hell of a lot more than paper paddles and broken promises. They're not the disease, they're just the worst symptom. The disease is the corruption of our politics by billionaires and corporations.
El Sayed is aiming to replace retiring Senator Gary Peters of the Democratic Party. A former director of the Detroit Department for Health and a longtime Medicare for All campaigner, El Sayed has even written a book on the topic. His platform also includes policies on rent control and green industrial policy, as well as his outspoken opposition to the US military aid to Israel. Speaking of which, his establishment opponent in the primary is an absolute villain. Meet Haley Stevens. She's the current representative for Michigan's 11th Congressional District, and she is quite a piece of work. Whilst El Sayed has stated he will not take a penny of corporate PAC money, Stevens has already received $1.7 million so far. And so far, so establishment. But her policy positions are grotesque. She was one of the 75 House Democrats who voted to, quote, express gratitude to ICE for, quote, protecting the homeland, as Trump's Gestapo goon squad from ICE were tearing through Los Angeles, upturning the lives of immigrant communities as protesters took to the streets of America. And if that's not enough, she's also a staunch backer of Israel as it slaughters thousands in its genocidal rampage through Gaza. Not only does she support legal action against BDS, she has smeared the UNHCR for being supposedly biased against Israel and voted for legislation to sanction the ICC over its arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Galan. She even described Trump's Gaza ethnic cleansing plan as, quote, a curious proposal in an interview with Jewish Insider. Her only stated concern was the idea of UAP's troops on the ground, with not a word for the plight of the Palestinians in such a plan. It stands to reason she's one of the biggest recipients of Israeli lobby funding, over $5 million according to TrackAPAC.com. Dr. El Sayed will have his work cut out, as Stevens has friends in high places with the backing of Nancy Pelosi. With the Democratic Party in a mess, however, after a humiliating trifecta loss to Trump's Republican Party in November, we're beginning to see a similar kind of movement to what happened to the Republican Party in 2008. The Obama landslide motivated the far right to mount primary challenges to their failed establishment politicians via the Tea Party movement, which ultimately led to the rise of Trumpism. The Republican Tea Party, however, sought only to replace a political establishment with an economic establishment. The reconfiguration of the Democratic Party must be fought to create a party that serves the working class once again, just like it used to in the New Deal era. We're at a unique point in history. The wine mums are being radicalized, and a generation of politically active young people need a flag to rally around. And Zoran has created a blueprint for others to follow. Kieran, do you think there'll be a Democratic Party Tea Party?
Well, I think what's so interesting about all of this is that the liberal establishment, or let's say the centrist establishment, of course, which the Democrats typify, the Democrat high brass typifies in all of its kind of arrogance and imperious sense of the divine right to rule. I mean, you know, Pelosi, obviously, high profile example of it, but it's just all the way through that part of the Democrat Party. There is this kind of strong sense that everybody that isn't part of their wing of the party or drawn from the same kind of ideological roots as them is an imposter. And I think that so much of that kind of centrist establishment, liberal politics survives on the idea that there's nothing beyond that, right? But it's just impossible for anything beyond that to be realistic. Nice in concept, try it in the real world, it's going to fall flat on its face. And obviously that's designed. I mean, first of all, these guys are paid for. I mean, you've said that, Helena, you've given some examples. So let's not underestimate that element of it. But beyond that, I think they've drunk their own Kool-Aid in the sense that a lot of them genuinely believe there can be nothing beyond them. There can be nothing to the left of them. And that's just an empirical reality rather than an ethical, supposition. And so obviously when you get challenges to that, whether it's Mamdani or many of the others that you've named, then it deeply, deeply disturbs them and it offends their sense of the divine right to rule. And I think it's very liberating. I think it's very liberating because it's like cracks in a dam. It's like being told this is the last wall in space time. And then you're in that prison for a long time being told nothing else is possible. Somebody starts boxing it and breaks through it, and you discover, lo and behold, on the other side of that wall, that's the end of space time, there's I don't know, pick whatever you like, a big meadow, and there's a lot of work to do. I'm not saying that we're by any means, the left is back in America or it's going to take power imminently or anything like that. But New York City, the mayoralty in, I think, arguably, probably still the most important city in the West after Washington, D.C., or equal to Washington, D.C. That's no small feat. I mean, his powers will be, of course, there'll be all sorts of checks and balances, and he'll come up against, billionaire media and so on. But that's no small feat. That's quite a remarkable breakthrough that actually seems to have come from more or less nowhere. I'm sure our American listeners or viewers will say that's just English ignorance, that, there's always been something building there for a while. But I think so much of this survives on the illusion that nothing beyond what the Democrat establishment or the Labour right over here, or, take your pick, what they anoint as possible and normative. And when that starts to be exposed as a fallacy, I think we could, anything is possible within reason, but anything is possible. And so it's very exciting.
I think what's important is the key issue here is canvassing. The key issue is having a ground game. That was the Mamdani method. People like to point to his slickly produced ads, and that was the main reason why he had so many supporters in the primary. And the reality is, these videos, these adverts, these are really good at getting people involved in the campaign. People already amenable to that messaging. It gets people excited to go out and knock on those doors. And it's when you knock on those doors that you change people's minds. There was a campaigner for the DSA who actually have a really big ground game they've been organising for a while. I know that people like to shit on the DSA a bit, but I think that they have done a lot of good work on the ground up until now, and they've had the member base ready to be out there engaging with people as soon as the time was right, which it was with this primary election for Mamdani. That's where the real primary was won, was on the doorsteps rather than on TikTok. And what we'd seen is their strategy was, from this organizer that I was kind of looking into what they were saying, they were specifically trying to speak to people who had never voted in primaries before, when the Democratic Party's line was you go and speak to people who've already been like triple primaries, so you get the highly engaged people. They were trying to build a new electoral universe for them to be able to draw upon in New York City. So they were talking to younger people. The number of young people under 30s hugely spiked if you look at the internal data compared to previous Democratic primaries in New York City. And the subcontinental Asian voter base, people of Middle Eastern backgrounds, people like that. These voters were far more likely to turn out the last time than they were before. This was part of the new universe, the new electorate they were trying to draw on. Some people, indeed, who had voted Trump at the general election previously. And so this is now a huge base of support, not just in terms of canvassers, which they will be able to draw on to within New York City more broadly, but also a group of supporters that was always there. They were always there. They were always amenable to the DSA's message, to progressive policy, to what is, I guess, a social democratic kind of remit, but at least it's coming from a socialist perspective with regards to the people who's pushing the policy in terms of people like Mamdani. And that what that does mean is that next time there's a primary season in New York City, the centrists better watch out. There's a ground game that's ready to be able to be drawn upon. Whether you're a Richie Torres or a Hakeem Jeffries, there are going to be an army of people, given what Brad Lander did by co-endorsing with Mamdani, right? He has garnered himself so much goodwill as a progressive politician amongst the people who are canvassing for Zoran. If there's a primary for Hakeem Jeffries and Brad Lander wins, I think he wins easily. If AOC primary Schumer in the Senate seat, I think she wins easily. If you look at Richie Torres could get primary by Michael Blake, for example, I think he'd win easily, because fundamentally, at a time when the Democratic Party and its leadership really have very low approval, people who usually would vote are unmotivated. But you've built, you've canvassed, you've been on the ground talking to ordinary people who weren't previously engaged, and you've got them engaged with a message of socialist politics. It'll be much easier to draw on them at a future primary for a House seat or a Senate seat rather than for the actual election for the mayor of New York City. And they'll be far more motivated to come out than the kind of centrist, moderate, liberal types who would usually turn out to back the establishment candidates. So at a time of internal strife, I think this is where the key time to strike is now, whilst the iron is hot for people like the DSA and other progressive voices on the ground in America.